So we're at Collision with Chris Schultz, and you are the founder of Launchpad. You got a whole bunch of other things that I want to know that you do. Tell me about what you got going on right now, from Launchpad to your venture fund to whatever else you got.
Well, I'm psyched to be with you here at Collision. It's been a great week at Collision.
Yeah.
I am the CEO and co-founder of Launchpad, which is a network of workspaces. We started here in New Orleans, expanded to Charleston, South Carolina. We're going to Nashville next, and basically we're building a network of workspaces around the country in rising markets. Mm-hmm. These are markets where entrepreneurs need the connection to each other, to investors, to partners, and so we're building a network to connect entrepreneurs to opportunity.
Where did this come from?
This all arose, the way I think good businesses should, just out of passion. I love working with entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 20 years. Started my first business in my bedroom, worked for 2 years the way, you leave the bedroom at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, go out and see some sunshine and go back in, and it sucks. It's lonely, it's boring, and it's slow. You're literally Googling for answers. You don't have anybody to talk to, and that's not simply not the best way to start a business. So fast forward, I started a couple companies. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. 3 years after Hurricane Katrina, the tech community kind of got together and said, how do we make the city better than it was before the storm? We don't want to go back to what we had. Let's go to the future, the vision of what we can build. So a bunch of us got together and we sort of said, well, the first starting point would be to all of us working together in the same physical location. Right. So we put Launchpad into a building, a bunch of people joined, and that was sort of the genesis of it, just wanting to be around other people as we were going through the same process of working with entrepreneurs. I like business a lot. But clearly there's a part of me that also likes helping people. And there's a philosophy that Brad Feld espouses called give first. Yeah. You always start with giving somebody first, because especially in an event like this is a good example. Entrepreneurship sometimes is defined by pitching. Like I'm going to pitch something, and very rarely are things sort of like, oh, okay, you just pitched me the exact right pitch, and I'm about to go do something. But the people who actually can get my attention are people who help me in some way, and I like doing that for other people. I like being able to help them or make a connection that actually is truly valuable for them.
With Launchpad, you're going into, I would say, tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Is the goal to try to help spur what you did here in New Orleans after Katrina? It was like spur this city into innovation, or what's the goal?
Yeah, I think so. So it's interesting because I always call these markets rising markets, right? Because there's so many pejoratives around cities, whether it's secondary cities, even emerging economies, or tier two. Well, I think New Orleans is an awesome place. Why aren't we one, right? But obviously, there's a rationale for all of those descriptors. But I do like to call them rising markets. But they are markets that are growing and emerging, and things need to happen. So yes, to answer your question, we want to support the innovation that's already going on. Anywhere in the world now, there are entrepreneurs and there are startups and there are people trying to do stuff. But everywhere in the world is also not like Silicon Valley, where you can go meet with 4 VCs in an afternoon in South Park. And so we need to build connections to each other. We need to have education, programming, and really help people build a network. So we're entering markets in a very collaborative way. We don't think we have it all figured out about how to create a great ecosystem, but we want to come in and support what is already going on. I do think that our strategy in entering a lot of these markets is a lot of these markets have developed a strong ecosystem or an emerging ecosystem within their market, but sometimes it's a little myopic. They're not thinking about, hey, I'm in New Orleans, what's going on in Nashville, or they're just competing to be the best New Orleans they can be. So the primary value that Launchpad will add is by helping cities be a node on the network that we're building.
And how many cities are you in right now?
We're in 2 cities, in New Orleans and Charleston, South Carolina right now, and we're going to be opening Nashville soon. The way I think about our roadmap is cities that you would like to go to for a cool 3-day weekend. Right. So let's go to Minneapolis, St. Paul. Like think about Prince, the city of creativity, music. There happens to be a lot of startup activity up there right now because people can live anywhere, right? We're all connected to this internet. We're all connected to each other. So cities that have a quality of life and a lifestyle component are the cities that people are gravitating towards.
Right.
If they have a cultural history, an architectural history, great music, great energy. But I think everywhere has a little bit of a scene, but sometimes you need to put a little fuel on the fire, right? It needs a little catalyst, and sort of finding the people that are sort of the building blocks of it, getting them together, sort of giving them the tools and equipping them to light that fire.
Right. So like, you started here and then you went to Charleston. So like you must have thought that this is going to work in multiple cities. So what did you learn from doing it here, and then what did you implement in Charleston?
And the origin story of that sort of growth was me moving from New Orleans to San Francisco, and I moved to San Francisco 2 years ago and got married in San Francisco, and now spend a lot of time in San Francisco, but I'm traveling a lot too because the focus of my business is not as much there. And looking back and kind of reflecting on Launchpad and New Orleans and the scene here that I'm very passionate about, I came to realize this is a common situation in a lot of cities around the country. Everywhere, economic development agencies all over the country have this plan of how we're going to build the next Silicon Valley, right? And that's silly, right? Nobody's going to build the next Silicon Valley. You want to build the next evolution of Nashville. You want to build the next evolution of Charleston, because every company in the future they're all going to be tech companies, right? Software is eating the world, and this third wave of innovation that Steve Case talks about means industries that are traditional industries in all of these cities are going to become tech industries, tech enabled, and so smart entrepreneurs, smart young people are going to find the ability to make a big impact and create innovation in a way that people in Silicon Valley probably aren't even thinking about, right? You take the maritime industry here in New Orleans. The maritime industry is a big multi-billion-dollar industry. Well, nobody in Silicon Valley is thinking about how to disrupt that through a software platform like Chris Stuckey is with maritime.
So like, you're right on where these cities, you call them, they get called Silicon Hills, Silicon Alley, Silicon that, Silicon this. How do you, like, you go into a city and, I assume that you're doing a lot of public-private situations where you go meet with the city and you go meet with the entrepreneurs. How do you coach them along? Or you don't have to be the Silicon, like be the best Nashville you could be. I mean, you're a big music town, so this disrupts the music. Or Charleston, you're a big fish town. Like, let's figure out this type of thing. Like, how do you go?
Well, first of all, the way I approach it is it's always entrepreneur led. Right, it's always entrepreneur. Maybe that's just my bias. I think entrepreneurs and people who are doers and people who are contributing to the community are the most interesting people to talk to. Nothing against government and economic development, but they're salesmen and tend to be 10 to 15 years behind what's actually going on. They're going to be the last to recognize it. There's going to be a scene emerging that's actually going someplace before they actually hang a hat on it, right? So I don't think any of this can be done from a top-down basis. I don't think it can be legislated into effect. I don't believe in that type of community building. It's about going and finding who's going to the meetup groups, right? You need event space, right? Meetup groups are one of the most powerful forces. We love having meetup groups and offering free space for meetup groups within Launchpad. So that having physical space is a really important part of our strategy. And then education and programming is really important. I tend to think of our approach to that with Launchpad as doing education in an open source way. So we provide a platform, whether people want to come in and do a meetup group or a lunch and learn or a series of events and kind of a class. We don't lead that as Launchpad. We provide the platform to do it, and then we will, in the same way as sort of an open source software, we'll take best practices from all of the communities and share them across. If something's really working well in New Orleans, let's take it to Charleston.
Right. I mean, you see entrepreneurs all the time, right?
Yeah.
And you want to help them. So what are some of the challenges that you see that they're having now that you've had in the past, and you're like, hey man, I've been there,
Yeah.
I've done that, and here's how I can help.
I mean, first of all, I think entrepreneurship and starting anything is hard, right? So keeping your spirits up and realizing that the reality of this is that there are going to be more downs than there are ups, and just that there's a cycle. There are highs and lows. You're gonna feel up and down, 5 times across the course of a day, right? So just recognizing that and acknowledging that, and not having anxiety around it is sort of the first step. It's like acceptance that this is the life of an entrepreneur. I try to be very encouraging. My natural bias is to be very encouraging, but I think it's really important to be objective as well, and sort of be intellectually honest with yourself and with others. And I do sometimes tell entrepreneurs, hey, let's think about this. Is this business idea that you're kind of working on, is it realistic that this is going to be the best way for you to be spending your time? Because you're investing, you may not have any money to invest, but you're investing your time, which is very valuable. And it may be very hard to build this business, out of New Orleans. And maybe you should focus your efforts on something where there is a unfair advantage. I think every business to be successful needs an unfair advantage. And in many cases in these rising markets, the unfair advantage is going to come from existing natural assets in that city. So what are the traditional industries in that city? Do you have experience in those? Can you find people with experience in those? Do you understand the deep problems in these industries? Are there cultural assets? Are there intellectual assets? Because you need sort of that unfair advantage, that moat to build it. I think a mistake or a challenge that I frequently see is you can literally go to any city, any of our markets or any city in the country, and there's somebody trying to build a food delivery service or an app to find out where the nightlife is tonight or whatever. And those consumer facing products are really hard because the biggest thing you're competing against now used to be that it was hard to build technology. It's not hard to build technology, but just because you built it, people don't download apps anymore. People are, so in this attention economy, attention is the scarce resource, and the reality of it is there are some businesses that are consumer-facing businesses that are going to be much more difficult to build in a rising market than they are in a market that's capital rich, like Silicon Valley. So that's, I do try to coach people on, are you sure you want to be focusing on this right now?
Like when, I think startups are a little bit more romanticized than they should be. Like everybody's crushing it. Right. So like how do you create a culture inside of Launchpad where it's safe to say, look man, Chris, I need some help. Yeah. Like I got this challenge.
I mean, I think that's a good, we actually I have a group of friends, and we actually meet outside of Launchpad at the bar called Captiville, and we call it Founders Therapy. And we have a beer.
I heard porch therapy.
Yeah, porch therapy.
Yeah, we had the same thing.
Have a beer and talk about your problems. And I think it's really important to have those types of relationships. And I also think, for that relationship to be real, it has to be a meaningful relationship. It's difficult to do that in just we don't know each other, but we're going to go, voice our, because you also need people who are willing to call you on your shit. Right. So your friends or people who know you and understand you will be able to do that.
Switching back to Launchpad, like capital in every city seems to be a challenge because they don't have the same, I guess, ripple effect that the Valley had, and it's very good. I mean, you got people who exit out of like the PayPal mafia, right? And they went and created more companies and more companies. It's not that cities like Atlanta or Nashville or New Orleans don't have those type of people. They just reinvest in different things. So how do you get these entrepreneurs in Nashville or in New Orleans or in Charleston connected to financing or that type of stuff they need?
Yeah, I mean, capital is always a challenge, right? Anybody, any market in the history of any entrepreneur in the history of entrepreneurs has always said, I need more money, right? That's just, and we need more capital in New Orleans. We need more capital in Nashville. From an investor standpoint, I often hear from investors, hey, capital is efficient. when you deserve to have it in
Right.
that market, it'll be there, right? Somebody's going to be looking for opportunity. So I think that, obviously the truth is somewhere in the middle, but I think you're absolutely right that in many cases we haven't had the virtuous cycle of sort of people, making a lot of money and an exit, becoming angel investors.
When you're you invest and you advise and you mentor these startups.
Yeah.
A lot of people learn from, I would say, failure faster than they learn from people's successes. So like,
Right.
what failure do you usually get? What's the story of Chris when you say, look, I've been there, buddy.
Yeah.
Here's one of my challenges that I had, and here's what I learned from it. So what failure was that?
I have launched 3 now product companies. 3 startups that I built a product and they all 3 failed. I've had successful businesses as well, but in this case, they all 3 failed. And I think my lesson from that is I'm not a product person, right? I'm an engineer, but I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not a designer. And the competitive nature of technology is such that you're at a disadvantage if you can't write code and you can't, build the product yourself. Leah Culver came to LaunchFest, one of our conferences, once, and she said, somebody with an idea for a startup telling an engineer what to build for a company is like somebody going to Louis Armstrong and saying, I have an idea for a jazz album.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point. So like, you became self-aware through your challenges and failures. So like, a lot of people aren't self-aware. Like I know that I am not a product person. Like now, if once the product's there, I can go sell the heck out of it.
Yeah.
But how do you coach them on becoming self-aware of what your capabilities are?
Well, first of all, that doesn't necessarily mean your company can't be successful.
Right.
You just need a co-founder, right?
Right.
You just need
Right,
somebody
right,
on the
right,
team. Like we all can't be good at everything.
Right.
I'm certainly not dissuading anybody from trying to build a company.
Right. You got to have
a tech company, because we're all building tech companies. But understand what your role is and what what you bring to the table. But I think I think you become self-aware. Over time, I think as you get older and you gain a little experience, and I think actually just evaluating yourself in an honest way. I do think you have to kind of separate yourself from your own bullshit.
Yeah.
like you're out there pitching, this is great. And you do have to pitch. You always, there's something called imposter syndrome, where people start to feel insecure about who they're trying to be. And if you're not going to try to be that person, you're not going to be that person, right? If you're not going to put yourself out there as the next great startup, you won't be the next great startup. If you're not going to put yourself out there as a great investor who just hasn't made a lot of investments yet, you're not going to be a great investor. So I think being self-aware based on experience is vitally important. But you got to dream, you got to believe. If you don't believe in yourself, you'll never convince anybody else to.
Right. Last question. Launch pads all over the world now. And we're talking about in the future. It's all over the world now. You do LaunchFest, you're on stage, and you're going to pay it forward to all these entrepreneurs through a lesson learned. What would that lesson be?
I think that lesson is going to be about perseverance, because it is hard to build a great company, and it's really hard to kind of accomplish that in life, and there's no quick hit scenario. There's no. It comes because of hard work. Right. It comes from putting in the time and putting in the cycles, and it becomes easy to quit. And I think if quitting is course correction, you're gonna stop doing this and you're gonna start doing that. It makes sense. Life is a zigzag. It's rarely a straight line. But I also know people who, sort of have. I call it checked out. It's not checked out. They have jobs. They have, they're fine, but they're not going places anymore, right? And I'm never going to stop.
That's awesome. Chris, I appreciate you doing retrospect with me.
Thank you.
And I wish you luck.
Yeah, appreciate that.